students are gone, but you are still here. And we know how you feel because you are done. But you have so much work to do to get ready for tomorrow. Good afternoon, podcast listeners everywhere. Welcome to After the Bell, a Stunt Brothers production. A podcast that gets inside the life of a teacher and provides a wellness guide for being prepared to take on this most challenging of professions. I'm Martin Stuvel.
And I'm Roy Hunt. And we share your pain, having taught a combined 70 years. The guarantee of this podcast is to make you laugh, make you think, and give you at least one little nugget that you can use in the classroom. So get out your marking, organize your supplies, or just pour yourself a coffee.
I want something stronger.
And listen, engage, and interact with After the Bell, a podcast for you, the hard-working, dedicated teacher who wants free lesson plans, free advice, and a free meal.
Okay, Roy, but I'm not paying for anything more than McDonald's. Well, Mr. Hunt, here we are, episode 10B, right? Because we had 10A last week on incivility, or rudeness in the class. And I must say, you're being very polite today.
Well, as an adult, I feel it's important to model. However, when doing this podcast on incivility, that I realize that there are adults who are not modeling the appropriate behavior. And I think you have an example for us.
Yeah, and that's why I think we want to discover whether this is just a school level phenomenon, or is there something going out in the greater society in terms of incivility? And I was talking to someone at a school where they have a parking issue where parents drop off their kids because so many people drive their kids to school these days, and they have tried to coordinate it so it's safe because you have all the people coming, and then you get a bit of a traffic jam, and some are walking to school, so kids walking to school and cars turning right is not a good combination.
Yes.
So they had a parent take this on to, in fact, coordinate it with cones and stuff so it was safe. But I was talking to him, and he said the rudeness he encountered from parents who just in their mind, they were focused on getting their child to school. And in fact, the principal of that school said if they could drop their kid off in the office with the car, they would. Like, that's how focused they are in terms of forgetting everything else that's going on, right? So they're trying to work that out, and the parent community is very involved in helping it, but there's a certain segment of those dropping off their kids that, are not showing civility.
Yes.
And it's something people didn't see a few years ago. And that's why I think there's something with this issue that goes beyond just kids, right? And it starts with kids, and we want this generation to be civil and learn to get along with each other because it's a skill that it's a hard life if you don't have that.
Well, it's interesting because a lot more parents are driving their kids to school when they don't need to.
Yeah.
We have, where we are here in North Vancouver, we have many communities that are very walkable.
Yes.
There's no reason why students are being driven to school. And traffic congestion happens especially at schools that have very large student populations.
Yeah.
And this is something that's happened more than just one school that you're talking about. It's happened at many schools. They have people come in to regulate how people park.
Yeah.
And I know they even have the local bylaw officers hang out at the schools just to inform parents of the way they're parking or the way they're pulling into the area of the school is unsafe.
Yeah.
So
it just makes sense in this area of climate change too, and understanding of things. When people can walk to school and for physical health and all those things, people should. This could be another episode. I think yes. We need to jot this down on our future episodes, right? In terms of walking to school and driving and all those kind of things, and maybe get a parent or two in here and have a good discussion. But incivility in the class was what we brought up last week, and we talked to Owen Howell last week.
That was really good.
Yeah, good discussion with a secondary teacher. So we thought it's important to talk to an elementary school teacher as well. So we are going to head off to Mont Royal Elementary School and chat with Steve Zlotnick.
And that's great. We're both elementary school teachers or retired elementary school teachers, so this will hit home for us.
It will. So off we go.
Here we go.
There's been more and more talk in schools and in the media about an increase in rudeness of students in the classroom, what the academics call incivility. Research shows this not to be only a North American phenomena, but a worldwide phenomena. Something is going on. We're sitting here with Steve Zlotnick, an intermediate teacher at Mount Royal Elementary in North Vancouver. The topic of rudeness in the classroom has popped up all over the media recently. A recent episode of The Current with Matt Galloway and CBC talked of an increase in low-level defiance. This would include calling out, leaving the class without permission, talking back, arriving late, and not paying attention. Behaviors that violate the norms of mutual respect at school. This incivility has always been around, but some reports claim it to be on the increase, especially since the pandemic. So thank you, Steve, for being on our podcast After the Bell. It's wonderful to have you. So listeners know, worked with Steve for several years in the School of Mount Royal, and we also served on the executive of the NVTA, the North Vancouver Teachers Association, which is the local union, for many years. So I've known you for a while.
It's a pleasure to be here with you, Martin, and with you, Roy, and I'm excited to get into this.
Yeah, so we always start with a little icebreaker. We call it ABC 1, 2, 3. So it's kind of like the Colbert Report. Have you ever seen that? Or when he does the questionnaire, the Colbert questionnaire. So just whatever pops into your mind, just...
Perfect.
We got this one's a little
different.
It's like a little bit of a quiz, right?
It's kind of a quiz.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So
It's Gen Z, Gen X slang icebreaker.
Oh.
So what do you know about Gen Z and Gen X slang?
Okay.
So for A, I'm going to give you a word and give you a choice, A, B, or C. And we'll see if you know. A, bougie. Is it A, luxurious, B, active, or C, happy?
Is it A, luxurious?
That would be correct. Good job.
are you doing all the Gen Z and then I'll do the Gen X? Yeah.
Okay. B, bussen. Is it A, moving, B, really good, or C, fast talking?
Is it A?
That would be incorrect. It's B, really good.
Oh.
Okay. And C, dank. Is it A, musty, B, popular, or C, high quality?
I'm going to use my Gen X thing. I think it's A, but I think it's A. Is musty? Is it right?
That would be wrong.
Oh, I'm taking it far too literally.
And dank is high quality.
Oh, that was not how we used that.
So maybe you'll do
growing
better
up.
on the Gen X.
Okay,
ones. Here
maybe.
we go. There we go. You'll feel more familiar with these, I think.
Okay.
Number 1, headbanger. Is it A, a problem, B, heavy metal listener, or C, a headache?
B.
Nice, good. Number 2, yuppie. Is it A, agreeable, B, young urban professional, or C, well-dressed?
B.
Oh,
Young
2 for 2
urban
with the Gen
professional.
X. Nice.
There we go.
And number 3, bogus. Is it something good, B, imaginary or false, or C, harsh or nasty?
Imaginary or false?
3 for 3 on the
for
Gen
3.
X. Yes.
Nice.
He knows his generation.
All right. That's Bill and Ted.
So let's get into the meat of this topic of incivility. And you've taught for how long, Steve?
About 24 years.
Okay, yeah, and before that, I think you taught in England as well.
I've taught in England, and
yeah.
I taught in northern British Columbia on a First Nations reserve.
Yeah.
And I worked in Mozambique. Not teaching, but I was working in development aid overseas.
So a wealth of experience, Mr. Zlotnick. And looking back, let's just go back 10 years, for example, but you can go further back in your career. Have you seen a change in the rudeness or the incivility of students in the class in terms of those low-level behaviors? Are they on the rise, or is it just some of us are getting old and we go, that's the way it's always been, we're just less tolerant? What do you think?
That's a good question. I think it is different. There's the low-lying behaviors that every teacher will have experienced, whether they taught 40 years ago or today. But I do think that the intensity and the volume of the behaviors has become more pervasive, and it's creating challenges in many classrooms just for getting kids to be their best version of themselves. So I think it has become an issue, and I don't think it's just that we are tired, because I feel blessed every day that I get to teach children and bring out the best and support them and have fun with them and get to play in my job. It's one of the best parts of my job. But I would say that these challenges and the incivility, it doesn't create sort of a learning culture that makes it challenges, it makes learning challenging.
Could you give us some examples of incivility that you see commonly in the classroom?
Some of the ones you mentioned in the intro, I think, are very much the common ones we see. So some of them would be not paying attention. That one's common. I think there was some study I remember hearing about years ago that the typical attention span, I think not just of children but adults, is about 7 seconds. And and sometimes that feels generous. So I think as a teacher, I think getting kids' attention, it's not a matter of conveying information. It's really about having like a hook. When I grew up through teacher education, we talked about having a hook and grabbing their attention. But increasingly, I've found that maintaining their attention is a challenge, because I think for so many of them, they're used to instant gratification. So whether that's through technology and getting some sort of dopamine release from playing a video game or going on social media or just sort of doom scrolling YouTube, they're used to getting some sort of reaction from that. So that's, I think, one part is the technology. And then the other part is not waiting. I think this is one part I've seen in the classroom a lot, is the inability to wait, or unwillingness to wait. Growing up, both of my parents are teachers, and my mother was a grade 1 teacher, and we would play bellhop. So when we had made a mess, we would have to clean up, and we would be, running around returning the toys or the items to where they were supposed to be. But we would also even practice waiting, where we would have to wait, and we would practice where we would have a question, we would come up to my mother, and she wouldn't answer. We would wait till she sort of acknowledged our presence, and then we would go. So we practiced waiting. It was something that we just thought that was normal. But I think increasingly children are curious. Children have always been curious, but I think increasingly they're wanting a response right away. And if they don't get it, they will just keep repeating it. And I think as a classroom teacher, when we're trying to have a culture which is about curiosity and inquiry, which is great, but now we have 25 to 30 diverse individuals in the classroom, having a place where we can make it coherent and work is being kind of overrun by the need for instant gratification, an answer. Even if you've just said that answer, even if you've explained it or it's being wrapped up in a great hands-on lesson, it's still, for many students, I think they're struggling with the need to have instant reaction and almost sort of a hand-holding through the activity.
I think when you talked about the waiting part, I think you're onto something, because I think of just kids out in the general community, at the grocery store, other times. When I was young, you just had to go along and wait. I think my own kids learned they had to wait, and it was sometimes a really boring hour or two that you were out there, and maybe they're not having to wait, right? Instantly, if they want attention, the parent gives it the attention, right?
I think that's exactly right. I actually did a lesson a couple of years ago, I've done it a few times, on waiting and not getting instant reaction, because I think the world that I grew up in and that you grew up in is so different from what we're experiencing now. So if I wanted concert tickets as a teenager, I had to go down to Capilano Mall, I had to line up, I had to be prepared. When I wanted to watch a program, even before the VCR was invented, I had to plan my time accordingly. So even as a child, I had to organize myself. I even think when I went to Handsworth Secondary School, when I was in grade 8, the whole school was pulled out onto the side field. And our principal at the time was very direct at telling people how disappointed he was. This is because some of the grade 12 students had decided to flush all the toilets at the same time. And so you think of that act of vandalism. It didn't work in the end. And I wasn't sure what had happened, but I was very curious because there was very strong emotions at the time. And there's 1,200 kids of us all pulled out to the side gravel field at Handsworth at the time. But I think of that act of vandalism, which required organization, planning, getting watches all synchronized, sneaking out of class, and then having the audacity to do it. And so even that, which was not a productive enterprise, but that required advanced planning. So I think getting back to the waiting and planning, I think that's harder. It's slower, and it doesn't give the instant feedback. There was a study, I think, a number of years ago, I think out of Stanford, that talked about the brain, different parts of the brain being activated by reading the same thing, but reading it in the form of a book and reading it on some sort of e-reader or iPad. And I think that gets to how we consume media. myself included. So much of it is in a digital form, and it just
that they've done studies, I think, even at university, where kids who still take notes by hand can retain the information much better than even those that they might be typing it verbatim.
Yeah.
But they're not taking it in at all, right?
That's exactly
so I think you're really onto something that's going on that has having an impact, and you're seeing it firsthand in the classroom.
Absolutely. And I think the challenge as a teacher is I'm regularly treated like a human sort of Google. I'm like, they want answers, and I'm able to give them answers. But the question is not whether I can, it's whether I should. And I think that's, I'd say in the last 10 years, how my job has changed. I've always tried to give them the tools to think, but I think now I'm quite, resistant's the word, but I'm a bit resistant to giving them what they want right away. I'm much more focused on giving them the tools, but that involves discomfort, because what they're really wanting is not what's going to be helpful for them, both short-term or long-term. And I'm trying to give them the tools, sort of how to fish, so to speak. And I do think, the kids are fantastic. I love what I do. I love working with the kids. But I do think I'm trying to build in this sort of anti-fragility, this ability to sort of do something that's uncomfortable, challenging, in search of getting something so they can become more independent and be the person they want to be.
How do you think individual student incivility affects the learning of the other students in the class?
I don't think there's any impact on any of the other students in the class. No impact whatsoever.
Next question.
Next question. As a matter of fact, it has a modest, it has a pervasive effect. Yeah. And that's, I think, the great challenge as classroom teachers, to be able to recognize this, deal with it, but also do so in sort of a positive learning culture, because it would be easy to become overwhelmed and frustrated or jaded. It has an impact. One of the ways I've noticed is through noise. So over the years, I've tried different strategies in the classroom. We teach manners and how to interact with others. However, some of the solutions have included, I think we had some cardboard to sort of dampen sound. We have noise-canceling headphones these days, which are very popular. Mm-hmm. We have carols and the old-style carol and some dividers from an election to give some visual sort of separation between students. And I think that's often what students need. I think they're so overstimulated that they need almost an antithesis to that to be able to kind of focus and relax. One activity we do regularly is drawing or do some art. And what I find is when kids have to engage, they really have to concentrate on an activity, they're more engaged, but two, they're much quieter.
Don't you find they also afterwards thank you for it?
Oh.
They realize, wow, I didn't know my brain could be this calm.
That's right. Yeah. There's a piece to it. And for all the talk of, mental health, I think sometimes being not just busy, but being engaged is so positive. Another thing we do is handwriting. I get the kids to practice cursive, and it's not because this is the way of the future, but I think just having the confidence to be able to write their name and actually to concentrate, because it's not something that comes naturally. I learned it when I was in the 3rd grade, and it was something we practiced, and I'm grateful. And I don't have to practice it a lot, but I know how to do it. And I think for kids, giving them the confidence to acquire a skill, whether it's drawing or listening or handwriting or whatever, or some athletic pursuit, whatever it is, I think it's great for the confidence, but it also gives them, I think, that kind of inner peace to just be content with doing the thing. They don't need a parent or a teacher to kind of bail them out, but rather they can be engaged in the activity that they're taking part in and be sort of fully present.
It sounds like you've really thought about this in terms of how do you address it now, right? Like, I don't get the sense you're just throwing your hands up in the air and going, nothing I can do, right? I mean, you're dealing with the reality of 2025.
Sure.
Do you feel it contains it and it is making a difference, or do you still feel you get yourself quite frustrated sometimes, or even a general feeling for what other teachers have told you too, right? What do you think?
When I talk to teachers, I know teachers all around the Lower Mainland and through BC and even internationally, and it's a version of the same story. I think with sort of the incivility and the lack of attention. I don't get frustrated, but I think I guess I'm always curious to find out, like, do our classrooms and does our current system work? And I would say it doesn't. We're operating on a different model, And that's no criticism of the people who are in it, because some of my colleagues I've worked for nearly a quarter century, I'm so amazed and impressed, and so have the deepest respect for how they teach. It's a challenging profession in the best of times, and to be able to do it with humor and I think with skill and patience is a challenge. In terms of solutions, I think the model of having 25 to 30 diverse individuals in one spot for 5 to 6 hours a day, I don't think it's working. And I think it could work with more flexibility around staffing if we had different people who we could take smaller groups, because ultimately I think this job's about connection and kids being connected. And I think that's where it's kind of got lost. We have kids, and then of course we put a huge amount of effort into maintaining those, developing and maintaining those relationships. But I just think the numbers game where you're putting out fires constantly, it does not work to be able to create the conditions where all the children will feel both safe, secure, calm, because those behaviors are becoming so pervasive, they impede that. So what that might look like would be the ability to take kids and do certain activities. For example, if you could have a cooking class where groups of maybe 6 would be able to go out for a time. And this isn't a thing about excluding some kids, but rather rotating kids and having diverse groups of kids being able to have a break. And I think that's what kids need. They need that ability to play and to have hands-on learning. But just the nature of the sheer number and the intensity of the behaviors makes the classroom sort of this pressure cooker that if you don't let the pressure release, like we were fortunate to be, we were looking out onto the creek behind my classroom, and it's so great that we have the natural environment here. And working with Martin, we would often take our kids outside and play, and that's a great way. So sometimes it doesn't have to be fancy, and it can be a whole class activity, but I think having the flexibility to have different groups and different pairings, and not just within the class, but even within the school, because sometimes there's maybe not a big peer group in the classroom, and you need to kind of give more opportunities.
Yeah, and I guess, society's changed so much, but you could walk into a class today and then go in a time machine back to 1950, and the style would be different, of course, but it's still the same way, really, right? We haven't really adapted and changed all these other things we want education to be.
That's right.
Yeah. Do you think parents are aware of the forms of incivility that are in the classroom?
I think they're somewhat aware, but I believe parenting styles have changed. And I don't think there's a one right or wrong style, but I do think as a basic I think children need boundaries. And I think when we have some of these behaviors, often there's very intense feelings by the children or by the parents as well. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important that we acknowledge those feelings, but we don't necessarily limit what the children can do based on those feelings. So it might sound a bit cold, but I do think we can acknowledge that the children are upset, but it may be that they're just not comfortable with something. And if we can provide a safe environment for them to grow, they will. So in terms of the parents, I think sometimes what makes our job harder is parents reacting to students. I've seen it in person, but right away. So we were just talking about waiting a few minutes ago. So when children have to wait, so if they're playing on the playground or they're out in the community, if a child has a question, sometimes the parents need to ignore them or let them know that they'll be with them soon and build in that waiting time. If that could be supported at home, I think it would make our job a lot easier, because the children would know that we're not trying to be rude or cruel to the children, but rather we are dealing with something in an order, in the best way we can. And sometimes that means waiting.
Part of the inspiration for this podcast was when I had listened to Matt Galloway's CBC program, The Current, and the academics there talked about how they think part of the issue is the fact that students of all ages don't get together as much in groups after school and before school and on weekends. In your experience and hearing the students talk, do you find that they are spending less time together?
I think there's two parts. One is organized activities. So when I grew up, summers seemed to take forever because I might go to a summer camp for a week, but I wouldn't be entertained for the 8 or 9 weeks that were our summer. I would entertain myself. I'd actually go up not far from here above the power lines and take a peanut butter sandwich and go with my Archie comics and go for hours into the woods, right into bear country, and just with no phone or anything, just go in the woods and play for hours. Yeah. And I learned, I think, to entertain myself. And so I think one part of it is the ability to entertain oneself and not look to the parent or to the teacher to solve it. So I think that's one part. The other part is there's a huge benefit to playing in team activities, whether it could be a team sport, it could be part of a band. There's all sorts of activities, but it needs to be where you are both reliant on others and have to interact with others. And I think a lot of the rudeness and incivility is part of it is a lack of practice. I had 3 sisters, so I was able to. Siblings are a great.
You learn the hard way, right?
From the School of Hard Knocks.
Yes.
It was not too bad. I had 3 older sisters, so in the 70s, so it was not too hard for me. But you do learn very quickly when you act a certain way that certain behaviors are either tolerated or not tolerated or appreciated or not appreciated. So I think we do that in the classroom every day, but I do think having the opportunity to practice those skills will give kids the confidence to interact with others that will give them the skills to be successful, not only academically, but also socially and emotionally as well.
Yeah. I found it was rare when they actually said they were going to have a play date or something after school, right? They would say, I'll meet you on, what's the big grade 4 or 5 online game they like to play?
Fortnite?
Fortnite, right? I'll see you there. And that's where they interacted.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure some of it isn't so bad because they probably had some connections.
Sure, there's a lot of teamwork and a lot of benefits. For sure.
So
but I
don't think
I don't think it replaces the in-person civility. No. And I think that's when they look, I know some Jonathan Haidt's work has looked at how people interact with each other virtually or in a digital world versus in person. And it's unequivocal. Like we are much kinder.
You can be rude out there. Look at the online world. Look at Twitter and all those places and how it's going on as we speak, right? Yeah.
And I think when you see the whites of people's eyes and you have to interact with them and realize this is an actual person, it's not a word, it's not me winning or owning somebody, that changes it. And that's the empathy and patience has to be practiced. Mm-hmm. And traditionally, I think it was because we were in an in-person world. But as we move to a digital world and as kids haven't had the opportunities, either with siblings or with friends, they've gotten more out of practice.
They're born into this now, right?
This is the new world. And that's, I guess, my hope that we could have opportunities for them in the classroom that are not the traditional 4 walls. No. But we can expand it. But to do that, we need sort of the resources and tools to teach kids in the world that we live in right now.
Right. So, what worries do you have if we don't take care of this incivility in the classrooms? What do you see as a possibility? Go big.
Yeah.
Well, as we speak, there's many challenges going on in the world today, and I think it all stems. I'm simplifying, but a large part of it stems from a lack of understanding and empathy of both your friend or foe and neighbor. And I think we have to both be understanding, but also have a firm resolve that this is something that we stand for. My mother used to have a saying, she would say, on matters of importance, or matters that are not important, bend like a reed, and on matters of, true importance, be like a rock.
I like that.
And I think it's that wisdom, and I think there's a lot of talk about being understanding and being empathetic, and I think we should be that way. But I think that can sometimes give cover on things of true importance, of basic respect and decency and kindness and love, to be more amenable than we should. We should be, I think, unwavering on this commitment to true diversity and kindness and respect for our fellow person, whether it's in a classroom or someone halfway around the world. But I do think that requires having some sort of belief system. My father taught in the Department of Education, the education faculty, I should say, at UBC, and he taught a course called Education Studies 314, which was all about teachers developing a philosophy of education. And one of the great things about our profession, I think, is you can teach in many different ways. There's no one right teacher or one right philosophy, but I think it has to be consistent with your values. So I think as teachers, we have this amazing role and responsibility to have a philosophy that's based on our background, our history, our strengths, and our challenges, but also to be open to developing and learning as we go. And I think if we can have that, I think we'll be more successful, not just in the classroom, but as we look to the greater world and all the challenges we're facing there. I think that gives you the flexibility to, like I said with my mother saying, to bend like a reed on something that's not really important. There's a lot of schadenfreude and a lot of concern with what others are doing, but I think that doesn't help us. And then on true things of, true importance or national significance, we can stand tall.
No, Steve, you know as well as I do in this career, whenever there's a problem in the greater society, they look at the teacher and say, solve it, right?
Sure.
So what would you say to parents? What could they do?
It's the old saying, it takes a village. If someone looks to school as the cure or the fix-all, I think that's what's happened. And I think if you look just in terms of what we're expected to teach over the last 25 years, it has grown exponentially. And I think there is a role for what we teach to fully represent the complete child, not just academics, but certainly emotionally and socially. Those are really important components of developing a full person. But we cannot stand alone. This is not something that we can do. We need to. It's very much like we need certainly three parts. We need the parent, we need the child, and we need the teacher to all be engaged. And we can do more, and we frequently have done more. But I don't think it works when the other parts of the stool are not balanced. And I think the equation, the relationship is not balanced at this time, which is, I think, why there's so much burnout with teachers and people who love this profession and train for years for this profession and have spent many, often decades in the profession, are just reaching a point where they say, I can't go on.
Do you find for the most part that when you do tell parents you're dealing with rudeness in the class and the way you're dealing with it, that they are supportive of you?
As a general, I would say so. I think maybe learning over time, it's less of your child did this, we can share it, but it's always coming back to this is a way, here's sort of what happened, and here's sort of a way we can move forward positively. So in general, I would say they're supportive. I think a lot of the behaviors, though, stem from relatively low-level things. Like I mentioned before, it's telling your child they have to wait. It's not letting them play video games maybe on a weekday. It's doing something that will make it uncomfortable for them, that's going to force them to learn. And I think that level of being comfortable with discomfort needs to be supported at home. And if it is, I think our job not just becomes easier, it actually we're much more productive, and we can engage children because they're used to that give and take of it's your turn, you'll have to wait, versus I want it now.
So, Steve, I want to thank you very much for allowing us to take a deep dive into this topic. I think it's something that affects everyone, teacher, student, and everyone part of the greater society. And I think we all have a desire that we deal with this at every level we can and every way we can so that we have this civil society that we're all proud of. And we're not just in our little bubbles attacking each other, which sadly looks like it is the way it is now. But you always have to have hope, right?
You always have to have hope. I agree.
Always hope. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
That was a really good interview with Steve. I've really loved the points that he brought up. I think it's different from when I was in the classroom. I know I've only retired since June.
Yes.
But things have changed, and
They really have. And he got to the heart of some of the executive functioning areas that are lacking skills and need certainly further support.
It's interesting because when I look at that span of time that we have taught, and then seeing how things are right now, that there's definitely been a change, and COVID didn't help.
No, it didn't help. But whether it's the cause, I don't know. And that's what we're trying to filter through here, right? And things have changed. And it was just good to hear Owen's perspective last week, a secondary teacher, and Steve's perspective this week, which is an elementary perspective. But, Mr. Hunt, that's only two perspectives, right?
So it'd be really great. We have listeners from all over the world.
We do now. Yes.
I know that this was our perspective, or the interviews took place here in British Columbia and North Vancouver, but it's just not a Canadian problem.
No, I've heard it's happening, and if you do studies, Australia, England, Europe, all places around the world are experiencing a similar decline in incivility.
So I would love to hear about people from other parts of the world. I'd love for them to share on our website the things that they have experienced in their classrooms.
Yeah, and if your experience is different from what you heard, they are just two perspectives, right?
Yes.
We want to hear from that. So stuntbrothers.ca is our webpage. And on the homework board, we have a place where you can add your comments and give us your feedback. And we would be happy to see that. And if you want to have us share it on the air, we certainly will do that too. And maybe you'd like to come on as a guest and hear your perspective. So you can always contact us on the contact page. And there's a link there on our webpage, stuntbrothers.ca.
That's stuntbrothers.ca.
This podcast is organic, taking shape with each episode. Building resiliency for teachers everywhere.
That sounds great.
And our website is stuntbrothers.ca.
That's stuntbrothers.ca.
We will chat again
after the bell.